I bet when you woke up this morning you weren't anticipating that at some point today you'd see footage of a young Morgan Freeman yelling at Spider-Man while he held a sentient wall in a net at a baseball game. But hey, here we are. And this character called the Wall is one of many Marvel characters that has been largely lost to history. And so in today's video, I want to take some forgotten Marvel characters and redesign them with a more modern eye, while also rewriting them to fit them into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Also, if you know any other really obscure or really hilarious old comic book characters that you'd like to see given this treatment, please name them in the comments. Whether Marvel or DC or anything else, because I could definitely enjoy going a few rounds of this concept. But for now, lost Marvel characters. Let's go!
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
I'll start with just some brief context for the Wall. This was a character created for a kids' TV show called The Electric Company that ran in the 1970s and had a recurring Spider-Man segment, which was the first ever live-action version of Spidey, and it had a tie-in Marvel comic called Spidey Super Stories. They were really goofy and weird, and this guy here got his power by literally just being a bricklayer who had a bunch of bricks fall on him. So here is my slightly less silly story for him in the MCU. Despite Doctor Strange no longer remembering who Peter Parker was, he still knew the hero Spider-Man as a relatively trustworthy Avenger, so when he and Wong were away, he'd request that the Wall Crawler pop in on the Sanctum Sanctorum to ensure that everything was alright in their absence. Spidey did so for a few days in a row one time when they were gone, entering the building, looking around briefly, even taking the opportunity to study some of the mystical artifacts to be found inside, then he'd leave. Until one day, when he came to the door, and as he reached for the handle, his spider senses tingled. He instinctively leapt back as a man on a rocket-powered skateboard, whose origins and redesign we'll cover later in the episode, burst through the door carrying a bag overflowing with Strange's artifacts. The man fired down the streets faster than Spidey could try and web him up. The Wall Crawler chased him and was gaining ground when the rocket-boosted bandit tried cutting through an active construction site to lose Spidey. Peter outmaneuvered him by flinging himself through the open upper floors and landing down in front of the racer's path. In a panic to escape, the thief pulled out another artifact, not fully understanding the power of the Wand of Watoomb that he now held in his hand. He pointed the artifact at Spider-Man and just yelled for it to do something. Luckily for him, the Wand of Watoomb can allow even those totally inept of magical power to create devastating attacks, and a bolt of energy exploded out of it, which Spidey just barely dodged. Meanwhile, the construction workers on site saw the battle ensuing and started to flee. Except for Joshua Waldemir. While he was laying bricks on the site, he was loudly listening to the podcast version of his favorite show, thedailybugle.net, where J. Jonah Jameson would regularly rant about what a menace Spider-Man was. Joshua had been told many times not to listen to anything that distracted him from what was going on the site, as it was a huge safety hazard, but he'd never really been one to follow rules. He was fairly close to the action, but faced away from it and had no idea that the battle was even occurring. He just kept on working as Spider-Man dodged around blasts from the Wand of Watoomb, until the artifact started to spark and shake in the wielder's hand. Not knowing what it was doing, but not liking the look of it, the racer tossed the wand to the ground in front of Spidey and started to bolt again. Spidey shot a web onto the wand and grabbed it, and then another onto the bag of the fleeing thief. The racer finally just unhooked his bag of artifacts and let it go. Spidey would have kept going after him if he hadn't noticed that the wand was still shaking and building up with energy. He tried just telling it to stop, but now it seemed the wand wasn't listening to its wielder. He tossed it down and just tried webbing it up, but even under a massive bundle of webs, he could still see the energy swirling. As it continued to build, a shockwave burst from it, quaking the entire site and finally making Joshua take notice. He pulled off his headphones and turned around just in time to see Spider-Man flinging himself away from the webbed-up artifact, not having noticed that Joshua was still there. Before Joshua could say anything, all that energy that had built up exploded from the wand, warping all of the matter impacted by the eruption into different shapes and forms. The blow sent Joshua flying back through the bricks he'd just been laying, and caused him to black out. When he awoke hours later, he had to dig his way out of the rubble of his former worksite, and was surprised to find as he pushed his way through concrete and debris that he was moving massive stones with ease. When he finally burst free, there was enough light for him to see that his hands were stony and dark orange, with chunks of brick emerging from them. He looked down at his body to see that it too had merged with the bricks that he'd been handling before the explosion. He yelled out in rage and confusion, wanting to know what was going on. The Department of Damage Control was on site cleaning things up, and their agents saw the mutated man and came to try and calm him down. They asked him to come with them, stating that they would do their best to help him find a way to reverse whatever had happened. He grudgingly agreed, but as they stepped off the worksite towards a damage control van, maybe a little bit too conveniently plot-wise, a nearby storefront was showing footage of a live Daily Bugle broadcast, as Jameson was ranting about how Spider-Man was sitting at the top of Citi Field watching the Mets baseball game without having paid for a ticket. It was something Spidey occasionally did to relax after a long day of superheroing, and the Mets general manager had publicly stated that as a thank you for all his work helping New York, Spidey could come watch games for free whenever he wanted. Which was nice because Pete loved watching the games, but he was also pretty broke, so sometimes it was about the money for Spider-Man. But seeing that Spidey was relaxing after having allowed Joshua to be caught in an explosion infuriated the already angered man. With speed far greater than that of your average brick wall, he sprinted away from damage control and headed towards Queens. We cut away to Spidey at the game so that we don't have to explain how a human brick wall managed to stay incognito, and an hour later, smashing through the wall of Citi Field right into the game in progress, came Joshua Waldemir, yelling for Spider-Man to come down and face what he'd done. Spidey immediately leapt onto the field, asking who this guy was. Joshua said he'd been caught in the explosion at the site and that this had happened to him as a result. Spidey tried to apologize, but the man wouldn't hear it. He'd listened to enough of the Daily Bugle to believe that Spidey was a menace, and that now, maybe he had the power to finally take him down. The two fought right there in Citi Field, and it was a rather embarrassing sight for the wall crawler, as Joshua proved to be very difficult to injure. Punching him was quite literally like punching a brick wall. Spidey tried leaping onto the man's back to stay out of his reach, but he was more flexible than Spidey anticipated, so this was one wall he wouldn't be able to crawl. Spidey was eventually able to web the man down until damage control could arrive with restraints made for superpowered individuals, but by that time the crowd had turned on Spidey and was just annoyed that the ordeal had delayed the game for so long. The Mets manager even later revoked Spidey's free pass to watch the games, as he stated it had become a safety concern if villains were going to show up to try and fight him. So, even if Joshua had failed to defeat Spider-Man, he had at least managed to make the wall crawler's life just a little bit worse. But by that point, Spidey had thick skin. One more minor problem didn't really bother him amidst the vast canvas of other hardships he was already able to handle. One could even say that, all in all, it was just another brick in the wall. Here's the context for this version of White Tiger, or Evolved Tiger, who is not the White Tiger from Spider-Man comics and from the Ultimate Spider-Man TV show. She is actually a human-animal hybrid created by the High Evolutionary, who we recently saw in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. This White Tiger and her sister were tiger cubs in the comics, taken and experimented on to be turned into part of a team called the Knights of Wandagore. And while the High Evolutionary originally made them on Earth in the comics, he later took them to Counter-Earth, which we also saw as the home planet of the Humanimals in Guardians 3, and was destroyed by the High Evolutionary in that movie. So here is my MCU version of White Tiger's story. When the High Evolutionary created his Humanimals in an attempt to breed a new, perfect society and utopia, he thought he had failed. The Counter-Earth that he'd created was just as full of problems as any other world, and he was prepared to scrap the project and start again. But even he was unaware that some of his genetically mutated creations had continued to mutate after his experiments on them had concluded. Bialia Lohu and her sister Niebe lived in Counter-Earth's equivalent of China, but unlike many residents of their world, they remembered every second of their time being experimented on by the High Evolutionary. And on top of that, their bodies had continued to alter in a way that other members of their species hadn't. They both became stronger and faster, and Bialia even gained the ability to shift from a human white tiger hybrid into either a more monstrous tiger or into a regular human. Not that she knew what exactly a normal human looked like. Of course, with a planet so vast, the High Evolutionary didn't notice these two, or the few others like them. Over the span of 5 years, Bialia and her sister found other mutants of Counter-Earth with unique abilities and gifts who were all curious about what their creator had intended for them. They covertly infiltrated one of the High Evolutionary's bases on their planet to try and learn more. They managed to get access to his personal logs because, like many movie villains, he records convenient diary rants talking about his evil plans so the heroes and audience can find out more about them, and they found out that he intended to destroy Counter-Earth, along with everyone on it. They needed a plan to stop him. They considered trying to sneak into his base to kill him, but at the time he wasn't on Counter-Earth, and his logs didn't mention when he'd return. They decided instead to steal a ship and go seek help from someone, or anyone, that could aid them in saving their people. Even if their planet wasn't the utopia the High Evolutionary had wanted, Bialia knew her people were still worth saving. They snuck off-world on one of the many ships that the High Evolutionary sent across the planet to get reports of how various cities were doing, and the team of enhanced humanimals soon found themselves in an OrgoCorp site, the company that the Evolutionary had created as a front for his illegal experiments. They then hijacked a ship from there, and like most teams, they conveniently had someone who was good at hacking, who managed to take the ship off OrgoCorp's radar. They didn't know who to turn to or where to look. They learned of the Nova Corps and sought them out, only to find that years earlier Thanos had decimated them and their homeworld of Xandar. They then learned of the many heroes of Earth that had helped defeat Thanos, and thought perhaps they could help. They flew towards Earth next, only to be stopped in the space outside the planet by an organization called Saber. This is an operation largely established in the movie The Marvels, which, to be honest, I haven't actually seen yet, and given how it's doing in the box office, I'm guessing you haven't seen it either, so let's glaze over the details of this group. They're basically just an aerospace defense system run by Nick Fury. When they were intercepted by this group, Bialia informed Fury's people of the situation on Counter-Earth, and Saber claimed they'd do what they could to help. But by the time they called Captain Marvel to investigate the ordeal, she reported back that the only thing in the space where Counter-Earth had once been was the burning husk of a former planet. Bialia and her team were too late. This was of course a tragic ordeal, and having seen their efforts to try and save their home planet, Fury pulled some strings and got the group asylum on Earth. Of course, this wouldn't be easy for many of them, considering Bialia was the only one that could shift into a human-looking appearance. Still, they all accepted the refuge and ended up taking jobs working for Saber as an intergalactic outreach and support team, flying off to other planets in trouble to do all they could to help. Even if the regret of being unable to save her own world still lingered, Bialia was determined to ensure that no other race or species would face destruction at the hands of a madman, as her own people so tragically had. Here is context for Tyrak the Terrible, who in the comics is an Atlantean, which means in the movies he would be one of the Talokan people under Namor's rule. He is also a servant to Watoomb, who so far in the movies is a faithful ally to Namor, but in the comics has attempted to overthrow him and take the rule of Atlantis for himself. Tyrak in the comics also attempted to infiltrate the Avengers to get at Namor, but since there isn't really an active Avengers team in the MCU right now, and Namor has no affiliation with them, I've left that bit out of my MCU version of Tyrak's story. Namor had protected and ruled over the people of the underwater nation of Talokan for hundreds of years, and for much of that time had been regarded as a worthy and noble king. But after surrendering to and creating an alliance with Wakanda, some in his kingdom began to question his leadership. His own advisor, Watoomb, was one of these people. Watoomb had long believed that he would be a worthy leader to his people, but had been loyal to his king. Though, since faith in Namor was beginning to wane, he considered that it soon may be time for him to take over. Watoomb had his own elite squadron of warriors that he trained and took on missions, and he had his own right hand in this group, a Talokan warrior called Tyrak, who was fiercely loyal to Watoomb and would do whatever he said. While Watoomb had not yet expressed an outward interest in overtaking Namor, Tyrak had stated to his master that he too believed Watoomb should take the throne. Unfortunately, every time Tyrak expressed this to Watoomb, he'd shut it down, as Watoomb was still uncertain. He had been Namor's ally for most of his life, and felt he needed further evidence of his king's unworthiness to lead if he was truly going to try and overthrow his friend. But Tyrak was much more impatient. Tyrak believed himself to be one of the greatest warriors in Talokan. He was stronger and faster than anyone in Atooma's team, and he believed that he may even be able to defeat Namor on his own. And so, ignoring Atooma's hesitations, Tyrak publicly challenged Namor for the throne, stating that if he won, Tyrak's own master, Atooma, would take the place of Talokan's king. Namor was furious and wanted to make an example of Tyrak, and accepted the challenge. The two battled before all of Talokan, and while Atooma was concerned for what Namor and the people may think of him now, he was also surprised to see that Tyrak held his own quite well against the king. Namor would come out of the battle victorious, even killing Tyrak as it concluded, but it was not as clean of a fight as it should have been for Talokan's leader, and this only instilled more uncertainty in the people about their king, and Namor could sense this. Further made furious by the resulting fallout from the ordeal, to try and show strength and decisiveness as a leader, he banished Atooma from the kingdom. Atooma stated that he had not put Tyrak up to this, that the man had done it of his own accord, but Namor asked if Atooma questioned Namor's worthiness as Talokan's leader, and Atooma did not lie. And so Namor went through with the banishment, and stated that it was a reminder to his people of what happens when you question your king's might. But this rash decision just continued the cycle of distrust and uncertainty spiraling more and more. The Talokan people had once seen Namor as a respectful and reasonable king, but now on top of seeming weak from the loss to Wakanda, he was also appearing to act more like a dictator than a true leader. Because of this, some people in the kingdom even left to seek out Atooma once more, stating that they'd be willing to fight for him if he came back and made a play for the throne. Feeling betrayed and seeing that others had the same concerns he had, Atooma agreed to go after the throne of Talokan and become the leader for them that Namor had once been. So, despite having lost his life in the battle, Tyrak had created the spark that would grow into a raging flame of the civil war of Talokan. Circling back to a character mentioned previously, here is the context for the Rocket Racer, who is a Spider-Man villain who isn't as unknown as some of the other characters I've mentioned today, as he did show up in an episode of the 90s animated series, and has had some semi-modern comic returns, but he's still fairly obscure. His name is Robert Farrell, and he's a scientific prodigy from a poor family with 6 younger siblings, who he had to take care of after his mom died. He ended up turning to crime to support them, and my MCU story keeps a lot of those elements. Robert Farrell was the oldest of 7 children, and his single mother had always struggled to support them, barely having enough each month to scrape by. And when she vanished in the Blip, where half of all life was wiped out by Thanos, Robert was left with the job of keeping his siblings fed. He got a minimum wage retail job as fast as he could, but found that that was barely enough to support one of his siblings, let alone all of them and himself. Plus, it was a waste of his scientific talents. He'd graduated high school at 16 and had gotten through 3 years at Empire State University for electrical engineering when he'd had to drop out to help his siblings. One night, he was skateboarding through the now much less populated Brooklyn streets when he saw some criminals armed with unusual tech coming out of a building near his own home. Angry by how everything in his life was going, and eager for a fight to let out some of his rage, he ran up to one of the thieves and grabbed him by the collar, only to find out that it was an old, sort of friend of his from high school, named Jackson Wheel. Wheel told him to take it easy, that they were just robbing apartments of people who'd gotten snapped. He said there were tons of abandoned apartments full of valuable stuff that technically nobody owned anymore. The tech they were wearing was mostly just for protection and to help with break-ins. Wheel and a bunch of other so-called crooks in the city were working for a guy who called himself the Tinkerer, who used to make gear for the Vulture, the Spider-Man villain who was in prison at the time and would years later be sent off to another dimension, where he'd spend the rest of his days presumably having a morbingly good time with his new vampire buddy. Robert calmed down and heard out what Wheel had to say, then went with him to go meet the Tinkerer, finding that the man had a huge supply of Chitauri tech, salvaged from the Avengers Battle of New York years earlier, that he used to build various machines and gadgets for his crew. After hearing confirmation that, at least for the time being, they were only stealing from people who'd gotten snapped away, Robert asked to join them, but also requested that he get to build some tech himself, using the Tinkerer's resources. He showed off his engineering skills to the Tinkerer, and the man accepted. Robert built himself a rocket-propelled skateboard that could shift into a hoverboard by tapping his foot in the right place. Over the next few years, his life completely turned around. He found plenty of rich apartments abandoned and took tons of money and jewelry and electronics to pawn off. His family started to thrive, and as some of his siblings grew to graduate high school, he even had enough to send them to college. Robert felt like he'd found a perfect loophole where he could steal whatever he needed and not be hurting anyone. But 5 years after half of all life had vanished, those people were all brought back. Of course, Robert was incredibly grateful that his mother was now back, but suddenly, his crimes weren't so harmless. He'd robbed hundreds of people who were now returning to see their valuables gone. Some he'd taken from would likely be fine, but others in smaller apartments and homes he'd robbed, he may very well have taken the life savings from. He needed a way to give at least some money back. He tried talking to Wheel about what they could do, but Jackson just said tough luck to those people, and was in the midst of helping the Tinkerer build a big piece of tech to help him pull off even greater heists, ones that were no longer so victim-free. Robert decided he could no longer align himself with that group, but still needed to use his own tech and skills to make things right. Through his connections in the underground that he'd established during his time with the Tinkerer, he learned that an organization called the 10 Rings, recently having come under new leadership, were offering massive sums of money for mystical and magical artifacts. While Robert didn't want to steal things anymore, he did know of a place that he could rob to get just those sorts of artifacts, and hopefully earn enough to pay back those he'd hurt and never have to steal again. And so for months, Robert staked out Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum to figure out an entry tactic and when the sorcerers would be gone. Finally, his opportunity came and he broke in, shoving everything he could find into his bag and getting out as fast as he could. Only to find as he escaped through the front door that New York's famous wall crawler was there to check on the place. And so the events that led to the wall's creation unfolded, ending in Spider-Man taking the magical artifacts back, leaving Robert with nothing to show for his efforts. Eventually, Spider-Man managed to track down Robert, intending to web him up for the police to handle, but Robert explained why he'd done what he'd done. Spider-Man empathized with the man and agreed not to turn him into the police, so long as Robert was done stealing things and done working for the Tinkerer. But Robert had a slight counteroffer in mind. He thought that the Tinkerer was leading his friend Jackson Wheel down a dark path, so he wanted to help Spidey take down the Tinkerer before Jackson could be convinced to do something truly horrible. So Robert became Spidey's eyes on the inside of the Tinkerer's operation. He was even still pretending to be part of the team when Joshua Waldemir joined Tinkerer's crew. The Wall's lawyer had gotten him off on the grounds that his attack on Spidey had been the result of a manic episode caused by the Wand of Watoomb's eruption that had altered his body. Tinkerer brought him on with the intent of the Wall helping them kill Spider-Man, who Tinkerer had enjoyed having out of his hair during the Blip, as Spidey too had been snapped away for that time. Robert would be Spider-Man's eyes for a few weeks, but unfortunately, Jackson would eventually catch on to what Robert was doing and would not listen to Robert's pleas to back down from the path he was on. In the end, Robert would have to don his own superhero attire and help Spidey face off against the Tinkerer, the Wall, Jackson, and Jackson's new machine, a really, really big wheel.
If you enjoyed this and you're new here, you might enjoy some of my other Marvel or superhero episodes. Specifically, you might like my Marvel superheroes turned into DC villains episode, or maybe the reverse, my DC villains turned into Marvel heroes episode. And if you are new here and you want another round of this, a good way to encourage me to do that is to subscribe. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is actually a question I've been asking myself recently that I think is a good self-awareness practice, which is, who would I be if all of my problems disappeared? If every problem you think you have in your life just vanished, was solved, then what kind of person would you be then? What would you think about and focus on? And try to feel yourself in that scenario. I think it's a great way to help you disconnect from associating who you are with the problems you're currently having. Because those problems aren't you, they're just something you're dealing with right now. I think it's good food for thought. I hope that's inspiring, I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Monday, where I'll be finishing my Pokemon Grand Prix.